The two suns blazed mercilessly over the barren wasteland, casting elongated shadows across the ruins of what must have once been a magnificent civilization. Heat shimmered above the sand-covered remnants of ancient structures, distorting the horizon into wavering lines that seemed to dance in the scorching air. Hector Renfield pulled his worn desert scarf tighter across his face, squinting through the protective visor of his battered combat helmet. The environmental readout on his cracked wrist display flashed warning after warning. Extreme temperature, minimal water reserves, elevated radiation levels. Nothing he wasn't already intimately familiar with after 3 cycles on this forgotten rock. His fingers absently traced the outline of the laser pistol holstered at his hip, a nervous habit he developed during his years of running. The weapon itself was military grade, a relic from his former life, much like the scratch combat armor he wore. Both had saved his life countless times, though he suspected his luck would eventually run out. "Detect any settlements nearby, Mira?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse and the perpetual dryness of the atmosphere. The small spherical drone hovering at his shoulder emitted a soft blue pulse before responding in its characteristically calm female voice. "Negative. However, I am detecting a faint biosignature approximately 800 meters northeast, behind that fallen obelisk." Hector froze, instantly alert. "Hostile. Insufficient data. The signature is weak and stationary. Most likely a small indigenous creature, possibly injured." He hesitated, weighing his options. Investigating could mean trouble, but water and shelter were becoming critical concerns. The fallen obelisk might provide shade at the very least. "Keep scanning for threats," he ordered, adjusting his course toward the structure. As he approached, the obelisk revealed itself to be much larger than it had appeared from a distance. A massive column of some dark, metallic substance covered in intricate carvings that had somehow withstood the ravages of time. In its shadow, barely visible against the rubble, lay a small figure. Hector drew his weapon instinctively, advancing with caution. When he was close enough to make out details, he lowered the gun in surprise. It was a child, or at least something childlike. Small and frail, with skin the color of pale turquoise that seemed to shimmer faintly in the shadows. The creature was huddled against the base of the obelisk, knees drawn to chest, showing signs of severe malnutrition. Large, almond-shaped eyes, dark as the night sky, turned toward him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Mira, translation protocol," Hector murmured, crouching down to appear less threatening. The drone hovered forward. "Subject appears too weak to communicate. Species matches records of the indigenous Varanii people. Female juvenile, approximate equivalent age of 8 Earth years." Hector studied the child, noticing how her rib cage showed through the thin fabric of her garment. She was starving, that much was clear. With a sigh, he reached into his pack and removed his last protein ration, a dense, nutrient-rich bar he'd been saving for an emergency. This qualified. He broke off a small piece and slowly extended his hand. "Dear," he said softly, though he knew she likely couldn't understand him. "It's food. You need to eat." The child stared at the offering, unmoving, before quick as lightning, her small hand darted out and snatched the morsel. She sniffed it suspiciously, then devoured it with alarming speed. Her eyes locked on the remainder of the bar in Hector's hand. He hesitated only briefly before breaking off another piece. The child needed it more than he did. As she ate the second piece more slowly, Hector felt the air change, a sudden stillness like the moment before a storm. His combat instincts flared. He spun around, weapon raised, to find himself facing a tall, slender figure who seemed to have materialized from nowhere. The newcomer was unmistakably of the same species as the child, but fully grown, with the same turquoise skin, now accentuated by intricate, luminescent markings that spiraled along exposed arms. Silver-white hair cascaded over shoulders clad in desert garb that looked to be partly ceremonial, partly practical. Most striking were her eyes, the same midnight dark as the child's, but piercing with intelligence and unmistakable wariness. "Lower your weapon," she commanded in accented but perfect standard, her voice carrying surprising authority. I mean you no harm. Hector kept his pistol leveled. You appeared out of nowhere. Sand stepping, she replied simply. A technique to move across the dunes undetected. A necessary skill for survival. Her gaze shifted to the child, who had scrambled to her feet and now pressed against the woman's side. You fed my daughter. It wasn't a question, but Hector nodded anyway. She was starving. Something shifted in the woman's expression, a complex emotion Hector couldn't interpret. She straightened her posture, chin lifting in what seemed like resignation mixed with pride. I am Kishra of House Varl. This is my daughter, Yona. She placed a protective hand on the child's head. And now, according to the ancestral rite, I belong to you. Hector blinked, certain he'd misheard. You what? You fed my daughter when she was starving, Kishra stated formally, as if reciting ancient words. By the laws of my ancestors, my life is now bound to yours. I am your property until death releases me from this obligation. Hector finally lowered his weapon, stunned into silence. Mira hovered closer, lights blinking in analytical patterns. My database contains fragmentary references to such customs among certain indigenous groups, the drone offered. The practice appears to have evolved as a survival mechanism during periods of extreme hardship. This isn't a practice, Kishra interjected sharply. It is the ancestral rite, binding and sacred. He fed my child when she was dying. There is no greater debt. Hector holstered his weapon, shaking his head. Look, I appreciate the sentiment, but I don't want to own anyone. I gave your daughter food because she needed it, not to claim you. Kishra's expression hardened. This is not about what you want. The right is absolute. To reject, it would bring dishonor beyond measure. Her voice lowered. I cannot return to my people if the right is unfulfilled. So what? You're just going to follow me around now? Hector demanded, frustration edging his voice. Yes. The simplicity of her answer was disarming. My strength, my knowledge, my service, all yours by right. Hector ran a hand over his face, the absurdity of the situation hitting him. Here he was, a fugitive trying to stay invisible on the fringes of inhabited space. And he'd just somehow acquired an alien woman and her child through an act of basic decency. A distant rumble interrupted his thoughts. Mira's sensors immediately pivoted toward the sound. Approaching vehicles, the drone reported. 3 signatures, heavy class. Matching engine patterns to known Imperium patrol craft. Kishra's body tensed. The Death Stalkers, she whispered, pulling Yona closer. They help my people for the biotech markets. Hector didn't need to hear more. Survival instinct took over. How far to the nearest shelter? He asked Kishra. The Broken Teeth, she replied, pointing to a jagged ridge barely visible in the distance. Old mining tunnels. 3 hours on foot. We won't make it exposed, Hector muttered, calculating odds. Mira, distraction protocol. Buy us time. The drone pulsed acknowledgement before zooming away, leaving Hector alone with the 2 aliens who were now, apparently, his responsibility. Stay close, he ordered, checking his weapon's charge. We move fast, stick to whatever cover we can find. If I say drop, you drop. Understood. Kishra lifted Yona into her arms in one fluid motion. We will not slow you down, she promised, her eyes meeting his with unexpected intensity. We belong to you now. Your survival is our survival. Hector wanted to argue again about the whole belonging concept, but the patrol was getting closer. Right, let's go. As they slipped away from the obelisk and into the fractured landscape beyond, Hector couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed irrevocably. One simple act of kindness had somehow bound him to these strangers through an alien code he didn't understand. The twin suns beat down on them as they fled, 3 silhouettes soon swallowed by the vastness of the desert, leaving behind only footprints that the wind would soon erase. The journey through the barren landscape was arduous. Hector led their small group through narrow ravines and dried-out riverbeds, always keeping the jagged silhouette of the Broken Teeth on the horizon. Mira's distraction had worked. The patrol vehicles had veered off in another direction, but Hector knew better than to assume they were safe. Kishara moved with surprising grace for someone carrying a child, her feet finding purchase on the treacherous terrain where Hector sometimes slipped. Yona remained silent throughout, those large dark eyes taking in everything, occasionally closing in exhaustion before snapping open again at the slightest sound. After an hour of walking in silence, Hector finally spoke. "So this Ancestral, right?" he began awkwardly. "Is there some way to, I don't know, cancel it?" Kishara's expression remained neutral. "No. The bond is formed in the moment of salvation. It cannot be undone. But what exactly does it mean? What are you expected to do?" She adjusted Yona in her arms before answering. "I serve. I protect. My skills, my knowledge, my life, all dedicated to your welfare." A pause. In ancient times, when war ravaged our world and children starved by the thousands, the Rite ensured that those who saved a child would gain a protector, a servant, and sometimes a companion. Her chin lifted slightly. "I was once guardian to the Eastern Temple. I am skilled in combat, navigation, and the old ways of healing. These abilities are now yours to command." Hector frowned. "And what about what you want?" "Want?" Something like surprise flickered across her features. "The Rite is not about want. It is about honor and survival." "And your daughter?" Kishara's arms tightened around Yona. "She remains my child, but under your protection. When she reaches maturity, she will choose her own path." They lapsed into silence again, the only sounds their footsteps and the occasional whistle of wind through stone formations. Hector's mind churned with questions and uncomfortable realizations. He'd been alone for so long, deliberately keeping his distance from any lasting connections. His past made attachments dangerous, for him and for anyone associated with him. "You're running from something," Kishara observed suddenly, her voice matter of fact. Hector shot her a sharp look. "What makes you say that?" "Your stance, your vigilance, the way your hand never strays far from your weapon." Her midnight eyes studied him. "And those markings on your armor. You tried to remove them, but I can still see the outline of the Imperial Stellar Command insignia." Hector instinctively touched the scratched section of his chest plate. "Observant. I was trained to be." After a moment's hesitation, Hector decided that if these two were bound to him, they deserved some version of the truth. "I was a commander in the Imperium forces. Special Tactics Division." He swallowed hard. "I refused an order to bombard civilian settlements on Proxima 3. My superiors didn't appreciate the insubordination." "You chose honor over obedience," Kishara said, something like respect coloring her tone. "I chose basic humanity," Hector corrected. "Not that it matters now. The Imperium doesn't forgive deserters. Hence your presence on this wasteland world, far from Imperial jurisdiction," Kishara concluded. "Exactly. Which is why acquiring 2 companions wasn't exactly in my plans." Kishara's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Fate rarely consults us before changing our path." Before Hector could respond, Mira zoomed back into view, hovering frantically. Multiple signatures detected approaching from the west. They've doubled back and called for reinforcements. Cursing under his breath, Hector scanned their surroundings. They were still at least an hour from the Broken Teeth, with minimal cover between. "They hunt us specifically," Kishara said, her voice low. "They have trackers that can detect Varanii biorhythms." "Why are they after you?" Hector demanded. Kishara hesitated, then met his gaze directly. "Yona carries the ancient bloodline. Her genetic composition can activate the old technologies that still lie dormant across this world. The Imperium seeks to exploit this. And you didn't think to mention this earlier? Would have changed your decision to help us." Hector had no answer for that. Instead, he made a rapid tactical assessment. "Mira, scan for any subterranean structures between here and the teeth." The drone spun in a quick circle, detecting remnants of an irrigation system. "Possible access 0.50 meters ahead." "Lead the way," Hector ordered, then turned to Kishara. "Stay close. If this works, we'll go underground." They moved swiftly toward the location Mira had identified, finding a half-buried metal hatch partially concealed by sand and debris. It took both Hector and Kishara to wrench it open, revealing a dark shaft descending into unknown depths. "I'll go first," Hector said, activating the light on his helmet. "Wait for my signal before following." The shaft descended about 10 meters before opening into a larger tunnel. Ancient conduits lined the walls, and the air was stale but breathable. Hector found solid footing and called up to the others. Kishara handed Yona down first. The child showed remarkable coordination, carefully navigating the handholds Hector directed her to. Once both were safely down, Mira sealed the hatch behind them, plunging the tunnel into darkness except for Hector's helmet light. "This system likely connects to the mining complex in the teeth," Kishara whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "My people have used these tunnels for generations to escape surface predators." Hector nodded, already planning their next move. "Can they track you down here?" "Not easily. The mineral composition interferes with their scanners." "Good. Then we keep moving." Hector gestured for them to follow as he began making his way along the tunnel. After a moment's hesitation, he added, "And thank you for trusting me with the truth about Yona." Kishara's response was quiet but firm. "The ancestral Rite demands nothing less than absolute loyalty. Your interests are now mine to protect, even for my own secrets." The words sent an unexpected ripple of emotion through Hector, discomfort mixed with something he couldn't quite name. He'd been alone for so long that the concept of someone being loyal to him, bound to him, felt alien and undeserved. As they moved deeper into the ancient tunnel system, the weight of responsibility settled heavier on his shoulders. These weren't just random strangers anymore. For better or worse, their fates were now entwined with his. The tunnel network proved more extensive than Hector had anticipated. What had begun as a simple irrigation system gradually expanded into a complex maze of passages, some natural, others clearly carved with purpose. Mira mapped their progress, creating a three-dimensional rendering that floated as a hologram above the drone's spherical body. After several hours of careful navigation, they emerged into a vast underground chamber. Hector's helmet light could barely penetrate the darkness, revealing only glimpses of towering columns and what appeared to be abandoned machinery. "Mira, full spectrum scan," he ordered. The drone expanded, its shell separating into a dozen smaller components that flew in different directions, each emitting a soft blue glow that gradually illuminated the space. Kishara gasped softly. "The ancient forge," she whispered, awe evident in her voice. "I believed it to be merely legend." The chamber was enormous, easily the size of a small starport hangar. Massive machinery of unknown purpose stood silent, covered in dust but remarkably preserved. Symbols similar to those on the fallen obelisk adorned the walls, glowing faintly with residual energy. "Your people built this?" Hector asked, scanning the area for potential threats. Kishara shook her head. "No, the ancients, the first ones who came before. My ancestors were merely caretakers of their legacy." She set Yona down gently. This place was once a center of creation, where the most powerful artifacts were forged. Yona, finally showing animation, moved toward one of the walls where the symbols glowed brightest. As she approached, the illumination intensified, responding to her presence. "She carries their blood," Kishara explained, watching her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. "The dormant technologies recognize her." Hector stepped forward cautiously, studying the reacting wall. "Is this safe?" "For her, yes. The ancient systems were designed to respond to those of the bloodline." Kishara's expression grew troubled, which is precisely why the Imperium hunts her. They believe they can use her to activate weapons of immense power. Mira reassembled, hovering near Hector's shoulder. "Commander, I've completed the scan. This chamber appears to be part of a much larger complex extending throughout the broken teeth. I've also detected faint life signs, approximately 2 kilometers deeper." Hector tensed. "Hostile, unknown." The signatures are consistent with Varanii physiology. Kishara moved closer, hope flickering across her features. My people. Some must have survived the last raid and sought refuge here. Hector considered their options carefully. Continuing toward these other survivors made tactical sense. Safety in numbers, potential allies, better knowledge of the tunnel system. But it also meant more complications, more people to protect, more chances for his identity to be compromised. We should rest here briefly, he decided finally. Then proceed with caution. Mira will scout ahead. They established a makeshift camp in a defensible corner of the chamber. Hector shared the last of his water rations while Kishara examined Yona, checking the child for signs of lasting damage from her near starvation. The tenderness in her movements contrasted sharply with the warrior's demeanor she displayed earlier. As Yona drifted into exhausted sleep, Kishara joined Hector near the chamber's entrance, where he kept watch. You're troubled by the Rite, she observed quietly. Hector gave a humorless laugh. I'm not used to suddenly acquiring dependence. We are not dependents, Kishara corrected, a hint of pride in her voice. I am bound to you. Yes, but I am not helpless. I bring value. That's not what I meant. Hector sighed, removing his helmet to run a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. In my culture, owning another person is wrong, deeply wrong. Kishara studied him, head tilted slightly. The ancestral right is not slavery, if that is your concern. It is a sacred bond, a life debt freely given. She reached for a chain around her neck, pulling it out to reveal a small crystalline pendant that caught the faint light. This is the Oath Stone. It symbolizes the right. When one of my people saves another's child from death, this exchange occurs. It ensures the child will always have protection, that neither parent nor child will be abandoned. It seems extreme, Hector said carefully. It was born in extreme times. Kishara's fingers traced the pendant's facets. When endless war ravaged our world and resources grew scarce, children were often the first casualties. The Rite evolved to ensure that any act of mercy toward a child would be rewarded with lifetime loyalty. It preserved both our children and our sense of community. Her dark eyes met his. The Rite does not diminish me. It honors what you did for my daughter. Hector remained unconvinced, but recognized the cultural gap between them. And these marks on your arms? Are they related? Kishara extended her arm, revealing the intricate luminescent patterns more clearly. Yes, they record my lineage and my obligations. When the Rite was invoked, new patterns appeared, connecting me to you. She traced one particular spiral. Here, this represents our bond. Before Hector could respond, a soft alert from Mira drew their attention. The drone displayed a holographic message. Movement detected at surface level. Imperial signatures. Hector cursed softly. They're persistent. I'll give them that. He reached for his helmet. We need to move. Now. They woke Yona, who rose without complaint despite her obvious exhaustion. As they prepared to venture deeper into the complex, Kishara placed a hand on Hector's arm. The people we seek, my kinsmen, they will be wary of outsiders, especially one wearing Imperial armor, even defaced. Hector nodded grimly. I'm used to hostility. Let me speak for you, she suggested. As one bound by the Rite, my word will carry weight. It was the first time she'd explicitly invoked her new status to offer assistance rather than subservience. Hector found himself appreciating the shift. Lead the way, then, he agreed, gesturing for her to take point. As they moved deeper into the ancient complex, Hector couldn't help but notice how Kishara's demeanor had subtly changed. She moved with more confidence in these surroundings, occasionally translating inscriptions they passed or identifying the purpose of strange mechanisms. Yona, too, seemed rejuvenated by their surroundings, her small fingers often trailing along walls where symbols glowed in response to her touch. After nearly an hour of careful progress, they reached what appeared to be a sealed doorway covered in elaborate engravings. Kishara studied it intently before turning to her daughter. Yona, come, she instructed softly. Place your hand here. The child approached without hesitation, pressing her small palm against a central panel. Immediately, the symbols around the door flared to life, emitting a soft hum that seemed to vibrate through the stone itself. Slowly, silently, the massive door slid open, revealing a cavernous space beyond. Inside, illuminated by the same otherworldly glow they'd seen throughout the complex, was what could only be described as an underground settlement. Structures that appeared to be dwellings had been built into the natural rock formations. Small garden plots grew strange, luminescent vegetation. And moving among it all were perhaps 30 or 40 figures with the same turquoise skin as Kishra and Yona. All activity ceased as they entered, every head turning to stare at the newcomers, particularly at Hector. A tall, elderly Varanii stepped forward, leaning on a staff adorned with crystals similar to Kishra's pendant. His skin bore more elaborate markings than any they'd seen, covering most of his visible body. Kishra of House Varl, he greeted, his voice carrying despite its age. "We believed you lost in the last raid." His gaze shifted to Hector, hardening. "You bring an Imperial to our sanctuary?" Kishra straightened, one hand protectively on Yona's shoulder. "Elder Morveth, I bring one to whom I am bound by the Ancestral Rite. He saved Yona from starvation when all seemed lost." Murmurs rippled through the gathered Varanii. The elder's eyes widened slightly. "The rite has not been invoked in generations," he said, studying Hector with new interest. "Step forward, outsider." Hector approached cautiously, removing his helmet as a sign of respect. "My name is Hector Enfield, former commander with Imperial forces, now separated from that service." "A deserter," another Varanii called out accusingly. "A man of conscience," Kishra countered firmly. "One who refused orders to slaughter innocents." Elder Morveth raised a hand for silence. "The rite transcends judgment. If Kishra of House Varl has bound herself to this man, then he is welcome among us for now." He turned to Kishra. "But you must understand the danger you bring to our haven. The Imperium hunts both you and this deserter. They hunt Yona most of all," Kishra replied gravely. "They know what she carries in her blood." The elder's expression grew solemn. "Then it is as we feared. The prophecy unfolds." He gestured toward one of the larger structures. "Kulme, we have much to discuss, all of you." As they followed the elder, Hector noticed the mixed reactions from the other Varanii. Some displayed open hostility, others curiosity, and a few, notably those with children, showed something that might have been gratitude. Inside the structure, which appeared to serve as a communal gathering place, the elder seated himself on a raised platform. Several other older Varanii joined him, forming what Hector assumed was some kind of council. "The Imperial forces have intensified their presence on our world," Morveth began without preamble. "They seek the awakening key, what flows in Yona's veins. They believe it will grant them access to the Ancient's weapons." "And will it?" Hector asked directly. The elder regarded him thoughtfully. "Not as they imagine. The blood alone is merely a component. The ancients were wise enough to require more than mere genetics to access their greatest powers. They required understanding, harmony with their principles, which the Imperium lacks," Kishra added. "Precisely. But in their ignorance, they will destroy everything in their pursuit." Morveth leaned forward. "We have survived here by remaining hidden, using the complex's shielding properties to mask our presence. But our resources dwindle, and the Imperium grows bolder." Hector processed this information, his tactical mind already identifying problems and potential solutions. "How many fighters do you have?" One of the other elders, a severe-looking woman with elaborate facial markings, answered. "We are not warriors. We are scholars, craftsmen, caregivers. Those few with combat training were lost in the raids." "Except Kishra," Morveth noted. "She was our finest guardian before her capture." Hector glanced at Kishra, seeing her in a new light. She met his gaze unflinchingly. "I trained from childhood in the ancient combat arts," she explained. "I was responsible for protecting the Eastern Temple until the Imperium destroyed it 2 cycles ago. Yona and I barely escaped." Another piece of the puzzle fell into place for Hector. So you've been on the run all this time? Yes. Until hunger and exhaustion finally overcame us in the wasteland where you found us. Hector turned back to the council. The Imperium won't stop. If they've traced you to the Broken Teeth, they'll eventually find this settlement, no matter how well hidden. What would you suggest, deserter? The severe woman asked, challenge evident in her tone. Defense, then evacuation. Hector answered immediately. This complex is ancient but solid. With some preparation, it could be made highly defensible, enough to hold off Imperial forces while you move your people to safety. There is nowhere safe, another elder objected. Not on this world, Hector agreed. But I know Imperial patrol patterns, communication protocols, ship schedules. With the right plan, we could intercept a transport, commandeer it. Shocked murmurs ran through the gathering. Even Kishara looked stunned by the audacity of the suggestion. You propose to steal an Imperial vessel? Morvith asked incredulously. I propose to survive, Hector corrected, and to help your people do the same. The alternative is waiting to be discovered and either captured or killed. The council members exchanged troubled glances. Finally, Morvith spoke again. We must deliberate on this. Until then, you will be given quarters and provisions. He looked directly at Kishara. The right binds you to this man, but remember your duty to your people as well. Kishara bowed her head respectfully. The two are not in conflict, Elder. He seeks to protect Yona, as do I. Our interests align. As they were led to a small dwelling carved into the cavern wall, Hector found himself increasingly impressed by Kishara's diplomatic handling of the situation. She'd managed to secure them safe harbor, at least temporarily, while maintaining both her dignity and her commitment to the ancestral rite. Their assigned quarters were simple but comfortable, far better than anywhere Hector had slept in months. Fresh water, clean bedding, and even some kind of luminescent fruit awaited them. Your people have built something remarkable here, Hector commented as Kishara settled Yona onto one of the sleeping pallets. We adapt, she replied simply. It is how we have survived ages of hardship. She hesitated, then added, the council will not easily agree to your plan. They fear change almost as much as they fear the Imperium. But you don't. A complex emotion crossed her features. I fear for my daughter. I fear for my people. But I have also seen what comes of hiding and waiting. Her eyes met his. Sometimes survival requires boldness. For the first time since their strange partnership began, Hector felt a genuine connection forming, a mutual understanding beyond the mandates of her ancestral custom. Before he could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Voices raised in alarm, followed by the distinctive whine of energy weapons. They've found us, Kishara whispered, immediately moving to gather Yona. Hector was already at the door, Mira hovering frantically beside him. Imperial advance scouts, the drone reported. Small team, likely reconnaissance. If they report back our location. Kishara didn't need to finish the thought. Hector checked his weapon. They won't get the chance. He turned to Kishara. Stay with Yona. I'll handle this. To his surprise, she shook her head firmly. The right binds me to fight at your side, not cower while you face danger alone. She reached beneath her garment and withdrew a slender blade that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. This is my battle as much as yours. Hector wanted to argue, but recognized the determination in her stance. Fine, but Yona stays here secured. Of course. Kishara turned to her daughter, speaking rapidly in their native tongue. The child nodded solemnly before retreating to the farthest corner of the dwelling. Outside, chaos had erupted. A group of Imperial scouts, 6 in total, wearing the distinctive black armor of Special Operations units, had breached the outer chamber and were advancing into the settlement. Several Varanii lay wounded, while others scattered in panic. Hector assessed the situation instantly. The scouts were armed with standard Imperial pulse rifles, moving in standard formation. Despite his years away from service, the tactical patterns were familiar, predictable. Mira, interference protocol, he ordered quietly. The drone immediately emitted a specific frequency designed to disrupt Imperial communications. They can't call for backup now, Hector explained to Kishra. We take them out quickly and quietly. She nodded, her grip tightening on her strange blade. I will circle left. Their formation has a blind spot there. Hector was impressed by her immediate grasp of the tactical situation. I'll create a distraction. On my signal, moving with practiced stealth, Hector positioned himself behind a cluster of rock formations. He set his laser pistol to maximum dispersion, less lethal but more disorienting, and fired at the cavern ceiling above the scouts. The blast sent cascades of dust and small rocks down on the Imperial soldiers, temporarily disrupting their formation. In that moment of confusion, Kishra struck. She moved like flowing water, faster than Hector would have believed possible. Her blade seemed to leave trails of light as she weaved between two of the scouts, striking with precision at the weak points in their armor. Both went down before they could even register her presence. Not to be outdone, Hector engaged the remaining four, using his knowledge of Imperial armor vulnerabilities to maximum effect. His pistol found a gap between helmet and chest plate on one scout, the knee joint of another. The fight was over in moments, 4 scouts down permanently, 2 incapacitated. Kishra stood amid the aftermath, her blade still humming softly, her expression cold and focused. In that moment, Hector truly understood what she had meant by being a guardian. We need to interrogate the survivors, he said, approaching one of the wounded scouts. Find out how much they've reported back. The commotion had drawn Elder Morvith and several other Varanii from their chambers. They stared in shock at the defeated Imperial soldiers. You've brought war to our doorstep, the severe female elder accused, pointing at Hector. With respect, Kishra interjected firmly. War was already at your door. These scouts are the first wave. More will follow, whether we invited them or not. Hector knelt beside one of the wounded scouts, removing the soldier's helmet to reveal a young face contorted with pain and fear. How did you find this place? He demanded. The scout's eyes widened in recognition. Commander Enfield? You're supposed to be dead. Hector's expression hardened. Answer the question. Biotracking, the scout gasped. New tech follows Varanii genetic signatures, especially the ancient bloodline. His eyes darted to where Yona had appeared at the entrance to their dwelling, watching the scene with solemn intensity. The girl. They want the girl. Morvith stepped forward, leaning heavily on his staff. How many more are coming? The scout's laugh turned into a pained cough. Full battalion. Heavy weaponry. They'll be here within 2 rotations. Hector exchanged a grim look with Kishra. 2 rotations, roughly 48 hours in standard time. We need to prepare, he announced, rising to address the gathering crowd of Varanii. This location is compromised. We have 48 hours to either fortify or evacuate. Impossible, the severe elder declared. We cannot relocate our entire community in such a short time, and we lack the means to defend against a full Imperial battalion. Hector surveyed the cavern, his tactical mind already, mapping defensive positions and weaknesses. This complex was built to last, he said thoughtfully, and it has systems we haven't fully explored. Mira, comprehensive structural analysis. As the drone began its scan, Kishra approached him. The ancient forge, she said quietly. It contains technologies we never fully understood. Perhaps, she hesitated, perhaps with Yona's connection to the bloodline, we could activate some of the dormant defenses. Elder Morvith's eyes widened. You suggest using the child to awaken the ancient systems? The same power the Imperium seeks to exploit. Not exploit, Kishra corrected. Harmonize. There's a difference. The ancients built their systems to respond to intention as much as genetics. Yona carries not just their blood, but our values. A tense debate erupted among the elders, with some arguing for immediate evacuation, others for Kishra's risky proposal. Throughout it all, Hector noticed Yona watching him with those depthless eyes, as if measuring him against some standard only she understood. Finally, Hector raised his hand for silence. We don't have time for debate. We need a plan that gives us the best chance of survival. He turned to Kishara. What exactly would activating these ancient defenses involve? A ritual, she replied. At the central chamber of the forge, Yona would need to interface with the primary control matrix, what our people call the heart of the ancestors. And the risks? Kishara hesitated before answering truthfully. Unknown. No one has attempted this in generations. The strain on Yona could be significant. Hector weighed the options, acutely aware of the lives hanging in the balance. We prepare for both possibilities, he decided. One team works on fortification and evacuation routes. Another assists Kishara with the ancient systems. We hedge our bets. To his surprise, Elder Morvith nodded in agreement. A wise approach. But tell me, deserter, why do you care what happens to our people? Your bond through the Rite is to Kishara and her daughter, not to all of us. The question caught Hector off guard. He'd been operating on instinct, falling back on his training as a commander responsible for those under his protection. But there was more to it than that. Because I've seen what the Imperium does to those it deems expendable, he said finally. And because sometimes standing by is the same as participating in the slaughter. His words seemed to resonate with the gathered Varanii. Even the severe elder's expression softened slightly. Very well, Morvith declared. We will follow your plan, Commander Renfield. May the wisdom of the ancients guide us all. As the community mobilized, Hector found himself in the unexpected role of military leader once again. The Varanii, though not warriors by nature, proved remarkably adaptable. Under his guidance, they began transforming their sanctuary into a defensible position, creating choke points, preparing primitive but effective traps, establishing evacuation protocols. Kishara, meanwhile, led a smaller team to the ancient forge, with Yona at her side. Hector joined them after organizing the defensive preparations, curious and concerned about what this ritual would entail. The forge looked different now, more alive somehow. Symbols glowed more intensely on the walls, and the dormant machinery hummed with subtle energy. At the center of the chamber stood a crystalline structure that resembled a smaller version of the fallen obelisk where they'd first found Yona. The heart, Kishara explained, approaching the structure reverently. It controls all systems throughout the complex. Yona stood before it, small and fragile, yet somehow commanding in her stillness. The markings on her skin, faint patterns that Hector had barely noticed before, now glowed with the same luminescence as the symbols on the walls. What happens now? Hector asked quietly. She must establish connection, Kishara replied, her voice equally hushed. Then, if the ancients deem her worthy, the complex will respond to her will. And if they don't, Kishara's silence was answer enough. Yona approached the crystal heart, raising one small hand to touch its surface. Immediately, energy surged through the chamber, not violently, but with definite purpose. The machinery around them began to activate, components shifting and reconfiguring in ways that defied conventional engineering. The child's eyes closed in concentration, her face serene despite the power flowing through her. Symbols on her skin brightened, matching patterns now appearing on the heart itself. It's working, one of the Varanii assistants whispered in awe. Hector stood transfixed, witnessing something that transcended his understanding of technology. This wasn't just ancient machinery being reactivated, it was responding, adapting, almost as if the complex itself were awakening. Suddenly, Yona gasped, her body tensing as if in pain. Kishara moved forward instinctively, but Hector caught her arm. Wait, he cautioned. Interrupting could be dangerous. She's my daughter, Kishara replied, her voice strained. And she's strong, Hector assured her. Stronger than you know. As if hearing his words, Yona's expression relaxed, and the energy stabilized. The walls of the chamber reconfigured, revealing hidden panels and control interfaces that had been dormant for centuries. After what seemed an eternity, but was likely only minutes, Yona stepped back from the heart, the glow fading from her skin. She turned to face them, her dark eyes now containing flecks of luminescent blue. The ancestors remember, she said, her child's voice somehow deeper, more resonant. They will help us defend their legacy. Throughout the complex, systems awakened. Dormant security measures activated, shield generators hummed to life, and ancient weapons emerged from hidden compartments. The entire settlement transformed around them, revealing its true nature as not just a sanctuary, but a fortress designed to endure. Hector stared in amazement. This changes everything. Kishara knelt beside her daughter, checking her for signs of harm, but Yona appeared unharmed, different, somehow older in bearing, but physically well. The complex will respond to her now, Kishara explained. She has been recognized as a true descendant. Can she control the defenses? To an extent. The ancients built safeguards. Their weapons cannot be used for conquest, only protection. But for our current needs. She glanced around at the transformed chamber. This should be sufficient. Mira hovered excitedly near Hector, analyzing the newly revealed technology. Commander, these systems exceed Imperial capabilities by several generations. Energy shields, gravitic disruptors, even some form of localized space-time manipulation. Hector whistled softly. No wonder the Imperium wants this place. And they cannot have it, Jonas said firmly, her normally shy demeanor replaced with surprising conviction. The ancestors say this place is for healing, not destruction. As word spread through the settlement of what had occurred, hope began to replace fear. The Varanii gathered in the central cavern, watching in wonder as ancient lighting systems illuminated paths, automated food production units activated, and defense arrays configured themselves at key entry points. Elder Morvith approached Hector as he supervised the integration of these new assets into their defensive plan. It seems we underestimated both you and the child, the elder admitted. Perhaps there is hope after all. There's always hope, Hector replied, but we're not out of danger yet. The Imperium won't be deterred by ancient technology they don't understand. If anything, it will make them more determined. As if to validate his concern, Mira suddenly emitted an urgent alert. Perimeter breach. Imperial forces have arrived earlier than anticipated. Heavy assault craft approaching the mountain range. The peaceful atmosphere shattered instantly. Varanii scrambled to assign positions as Hector barked orders. Activate the outer defenses. Get the non-combatants to the inner chambers. Kishara appeared at his side, her ceremonial blade drawn. They must have called for reinforcements before we captured the scouts. Or they were already on their way, Hector muttered grimly. He turned to find Yona standing nearby, her expression unervingly calm amidst the chaos. Can you control the defensive systems? She nodded solemnly. The ancestors will guide my hands. Despite the gravity of the situation, Hector found himself believing her. Then let's give the Imperium a welcome they won't forget. The assault began with precision strikes against the mountain face, standard Imperial procedure for flushing out entrenched positions. But as their energy weapons struck the outer perimeter, ancient shield generators activated, absorbing and dissipating the blasts. From the command center they'd established in the upper level of the settlement, Hector watched through Mira's enhanced visual feed as the Imperial commanders registered confusion at their ineffective bombardment. They'll try ground forces next, he predicted. Standard pincer movement. Kishar nodded, studying the tactical display. The northern approach is most vulnerable. But they don't know that, Hector noted with grim satisfaction. They'll follow protocol. Equal distribution along all potential entry points. Sure enough, Imperial drop ships soon deployed troops at regular intervals around the mountain base. Heavily armored soldiers began advancing toward the concealed entrances, weapons at the ready. Yona stood before an ancient control panel, her small hands moving with surprising confidence across its surface. As the Imperial troops reached predetermined positions, she activated the first layer of defenses. The ground beneath the advancing soldiers suddenly shifted, not violently, but with deliberate precision. Gravitic disruptors altered local gravity fields, causing troops to stumble, their coordinated advance faltering. Simultaneously, Hidden emplacements released clouds of what appeared to be luminescent particles. Non-lethal incapacitants, Kishara explained, noticing Hector's questioning look. The ancestors preferred to disable rather than destroy their enemies. The particles adhered to Imperial armor, interfering with their systems. Soldiers stumbled blindly, communications failed, and weapon targeting systems malfunctioned. For a moment, it seemed the ancient defenses might repel the invasion without bloodshed. Then came the walkers, massive, quadrupedal assault vehicles designed to overcome difficult terrain. Their elevated weapon platforms remained above the particle clouds, and their stabilization systems compensated for the gravitic disruptions. "They're adapting," Hector muttered. "Yona, do we have anything that can handle those walkers?" The child's brow furrowed in concentration. "Yes, but—" She hesitated. "The ancestors say it will require more energy." "What kind of energy?" Kishara asked sharply. "From me," Yona replied simply. Before either adult could object, Yona placed both hands firmly on the control panel. Energy surged visibly through her small body, the symbols on her skin flaring with painful brightness. She gasped but maintained contact. Throughout the complex, power redistributed. Lights dimmed momentarily before the ancient machinery responded. From concealed silos in the mountainside, sleek projectiles launched. Not explosives, but some form of directed energy weapon that targeted the walkers with unerring precision. Where the energy struck, Imperial technology simply stopped. Engines died, weapon systems went offline, communications ceased. One by one, the massive walkers froze in place, transformed from unstoppable assault vehicles to useless metal sculptures. Yona removed her hands from the panel, swaying slightly. Kishara caught her daughter before she could fall, alarm evident in her features. "That's enough," she said firmly. "No more." Hector monitored the battlefield, watching the Imperial forces regroup. The initial assault had been repelled with remarkable efficiency, but he knew better than to celebrate prematurely. "They'll call in orbital support next," he predicted grimly. "The shields will not withstand orbital bombardment for long," Mira confirmed, analyzing the energy outputs. "Then we need to strike while they're disorganized," Hector decided. "Hit their command structure directly." Kishara looked up from where she tended to her exhausted daughter. "You mean to go outside? To attack them personally?" "Sometimes the best defense is a decisive offense," Hector replied, checking his weapon. "I know Imperial command protocols, their vulnerabilities. If we can eliminate their field commander, it will buy us crucial time." "I'm coming with you," Kishara declared, standing. "No, Yona needs you, and someone needs to coordinate the defenses here." "The Rite doesn't obligate you to die unnecessarily," Hector interrupted. "Your primary duty is to your daughter, especially now." Kishara seemed torn, the conflict between her obligation to Hector and her concern for Yona evident in her expression. Finally, she reached for her neck, removing the crystalline pendant, the oath stone, and pressing it into Hector's hand. "Take this," she said quietly. "It will remind you that you do not fight alone, even when you stand apart from us." The gesture caught him off guard. He closed his fingers around the crystal, feeling its subtle warmth. "I'll return it when this is done." "You will return," she corrected, unexpected emotion coloring her voice. "The Rite remains unfulfilled." Something passed between them in that moment. Something beyond the bonds of ancient custom or tactical alliance. Hector found himself wanting to say more, but years of emotional discipline held him back. Instead, he turned to Mira. "Upload all tactical data to my helmet. I need complete situational awareness." "You can't possibly mean to go alone," Elder Morvith protested, having overheard the exchange. "Not entirely alone," Hector replied, a grim smile forming. "I'm taking 6 of these ancient defense drones that Yona activated. They'll provide cover and distraction." He gestured to sleek, spherical devices that now hovered near the ceiling, similar to Mira in basic design, but clearly of much older, more advanced construction. "This is madness," the severe elder declared. "You will fail, and in failing, reveal our final defenses." "Perhaps," Hector acknowledged. But doing nothing ensures our eventual defeat. The Imperium never retreats from a target they've deemed strategically valuable. Surprisingly, it was Yona who ended the debate. Still weakened from her exertion, she nevertheless stood, approaching Hector with determined steps. "The ancestors approve your path," she said solemnly. "They will guide your steps." She reached up, touching his forehead with her small hand. A brief flash of the same energy that had flowed through the ancient systems transferred to him, leaving a faint, luminescent mark that quickly faded from visibility. "What was that?" Hector asked, feeling a strange clarity settle over his thoughts. "Recognition," Yona explained simply. "The defenses will know you as ally." With final preparations complete, Hector made his way to one of the concealed exits, the 6 ancient drones following silently. Mira remained behind, connected to the complex's systems to provide remote intelligence. Before departing, he paused, looking back at Kishara. "If I don't return, you will," she interjected firmly. "The bond demands it. But if I don't," he persisted, "get these people to safety. There's an abandoned mining outpost in the Scarlet Canyons, 3 days' journey south. Imperial sensors can't penetrate the mineral deposits there." Kishara nodded reluctantly. "We will wait exactly 18 hours, not a moment longer." With a final nod, Hector slipped into the passage, the ancient drones arrayed around him like silent guardians. The oath stone hung against his chest, its weight a constant reminder of the unexpected connections he'd formed. Outside, dusk had fallen across the barren landscape, casting long shadows that provided additional cover. The Imperial forces had established a command center approximately 2 kilometers from the mountain base, a prefabricated structure surrounded by energy barriers and guard posts. Using the tactical data Mira continuously updated to his helmet display, Hector navigated between Imperial patrols, the ancient drones mimicking his movements with uncanny precision. When detection seemed inevitable, the drones would create diversions, strange light patterns, or phantom energy signatures that drew attention away from his advance. As he drew closer to the Imperial Command Center, Hector began to recognize the insignia and markings of the units deployed. These weren't standard occupation forces. They were the 7th Special Tactics Division, his former command. The realization sent a cold wave of understanding through him. This wasn't a routine resource extraction or security operation. This was personal, a hunt for the deserter who had embarrassed Imperial command, combined with the opportunity to secure powerful ancient technology. And that meant the commander would be... Hector's suspicions were confirmed when he got close enough to observe the command center's entry point. Standing there, issuing orders with characteristic precision, was General Varric, his former mentor and the man who had ordered the civilian bombardment that drove Hector to desert. A tall, gaunt figure with a cybernetically enhanced left eye that glowed faintly in the gathering darkness. Varric represented everything Hector had come to despise about the Imperium: brilliant, efficient, and utterly without moral constraint when it came to achieving objectives. Adjusting his plan accordingly, Hector directed the ancient drones to create a more substantial distraction. They moved into position around the Imperial perimeter, then simultaneously activated some form of energy pulse that temporarily disrupted the base's power grid. In the momentary confusion, Hector slipped through a blind spot in the security cordon, using his still valid command codes to bypass the inner perimeter alert systems. Years of operating within Imperial installations had taught him every weakness in their standardized security protocols. By the time the backup generators restored power, he was inside the command center, moving silently through maintenance corridors toward the central operations room, where Varric would undoubtedly be coordinating the response to the power failure. Reaching a ventilation access point above the operations room, Hector peered through the grating. Below, Imperial officers scurried to restore systems while Varric stood calmly at the central holographic display, studying the mountain fortress with clinical detachment. "Recalibrate the orbital strike parameters," the general ordered. "I want precision targeting of all potential shield generator locations. Minimum yield to preserve the technology we're here to recover." "Sir," A junior officer interjected hesitantly. Initial scans indicate the shield technology exceeds our current understanding. Even precision strikes may damage the very systems we're trying to secure. Varric's cybernetic eye flared briefly with irritation. The alternative is a ground assault against defenses that have already neutralized our heavy armor. Acceptable losses become unacceptable when failure is the outcome, Lieutenant. There's another option, Hector announced, dropping from the ventilation shaft to land in a crouch before straightening to face his former commander. Withdraw your forces, Varric. This place isn't what you think it is. Every weapon in the room instantly targeted him, but Varric raised a hand, preventing immediate fire. A slow, cold smile spread across the general's features. Commander Renfield, how considerate of you to save us the trouble of extracting you from that mountain. His cybernetic eye scanned Hector methodically, though I know you seem to have acquired some unusual enhancements since your desertion. Hector realized that Varric was detecting the faint energy signature from Yona's recognition mark. He kept his expression neutral, using the moment to assess potential escape routes and tactical advantages. The technology in that mountain isn't a weapon, Hector stated. At least, not in the way you imagine. It's sentient in its way. It chooses who can use it and for what purpose. Varric's expression showed polite skepticism. How charmingly primitive, attributing mystical properties to advanced technology. But then, you always did have a regrettable tendency toward sentimentality. He gestured dismissively. The indigenous population has clearly influenced your thinking. They've influenced more than my thinking, Hector replied, subtly activating a signal to the ancient drones waiting outside. They've shown me what the Imperium has forgotten. That power without principle destroys itself eventually. The general sighed theatrically. Spare me the philosophical awakening. Renfield, you're a deserter, a traitor to everything the Imperium stands for. Your presence here merely confirms that the mountain contains something of extraordinary value. You're right about that, Hector acknowledged. But it's not something you can take. It's something you'd have to be given, and you've done nothing to deserve it. Before Varric could respond, the ancient drones initiated their second protocol. Throughout the Imperial base, systems began malfunctioning in coordinated patterns. Communication scrambled, weapons safeties engaged, door mechanisms jammed. Even the officers' neural implants experienced interference, causing momentary disorientation. In the brief chaos, Hector made his move, not against Varric, as the general might have expected, but toward the command console. With quick, practiced movements, he inserted a data crystal Mira had prepared, infiltrating the Imperial tactical network. Predictable as always, Renfield, Varric remarked, recovering faster than his subordinates and drawing his sidearm. A diversion to cover a strategic objective. My teachings weren't entirely wasted on you. No, they weren't, Hector agreed, raising his hands slowly as weapons reoriented on him. You taught me to identify the adversary's critical vulnerability. Right now, that's your orbital positioning system. Varric's expression faltered as comprehension dawned. The data crystal was already flashing green. Mission complete. What have you done? The general demanded. Introduced certain anomalies into your targeting systems. Any orbital strike you order will have a 70% chance of hitting your own position instead of its intended target. The general's cybernetic eye flared red with fury. You're bluffing. Test it if you like, Hector suggested calmly. But I recommend a low-yield warhead. For safety. The room had gone deathly silent, Imperial officers frozen in place as they awaited Varric's response. The general's augmented mind was undoubtedly calculating probabilities, weighing options, searching for the lie in Hector's claim. Even if you've compromised our orbital systems, Varric said finally, you've accomplished nothing beyond delay. You cannot leave this room alive, and without you, those primitive natives will eventually fall to conventional assault. That's where you're wrong, Hector replied. On both counts. At that precise moment, the ancient drones breached the command center's outer defenses, their advanced systems overriding Imperial security with contemptuous ease. They swarmed into the operations room, creating a defensive perimeter around Hector. What happened next would later be described in hushed tones by the few Imperial witnesses who survived. The drones emitted a harmonic energy field that rendered conventional weapons useless, their circuitry temporarily frozen in non-functional states. In the ensuing confusion, Hector addressed his former mentor one final time. The people you dismiss as primitives are the caretakers of technology far beyond Imperial understanding. They've chosen to use it for protection rather than conquest. You might learn something from them, if you were capable of learning anything beyond military doctrine. Varric's expression contorted with rage, but before he could respond, the drones expanded their energy field, inducing a state of unconsciousness in every Imperial officer in the room. Even the general, with his enhanced physiology, succumbed after a brief struggle, collapsing alongside his subordinates. Moving quickly, Hector retrieved his data crystal and accessed the Imperial systems. He initiated a series of commands that would scramble their tactical operations beyond easy recovery, buying precious time for the Varanii. Mira, he communicated through his helmet, status report. Imperial forces in disarray, Commander, the drone's voice replied. Their command structure has been effectively neutralized. Estimated recovery time, minimum 12 hours. And the settlement? Secure. Kishra has coordinated defense of all entry points. Yona's condition has stabilized. Relief washed through him at this last piece of information. Prepare for Phase 2. We'll need transport. Working efficiently, Hector commandeered an Imperial shuttle from the landing area, using Varric's authentication codes to override security protocols. The ancient drones accompanied him, their silent efficiency making the operation far smoother than he had dared hope. As dawn broke over the horizon, Hector guided the stolen shuttle toward the mountain fortress, the unconscious form of General Varric secured in the cargo hold. The general would serve as both hostage and bargaining chip in the next phase of the plan. When the shuttle landed on a plateau near one of the now exposed entrances to the Varanii settlement, Kishra was waiting, her stance tense until she recognized Hector through the viewport. The relief that transformed her features struck him more powerfully than he would have expected. As he descended the shuttle's ramp, she approached rapidly, stopping just short of embracing him. Instead, she reached out to touch the oath stone that still hung around his neck. "You return," she said simply, though her voice carried undercurrents of emotion that belied the straightforward words. "I said I would," Hector replied, surprised by the warmth that filled him at her obvious relief. "And I brought presents." He gestured toward the shuttle. One slightly used Imperial transport, complete with navigation codes and security clearances. And one Imperial general who might be useful in negotiating safe passage. Kishra's eyes widened slightly. "You captured their commander?" "Let's just say I arranged an extended nap for my former mentor," Hector explained with grim satisfaction. "He'll be unconscious for several more hours, by which time we should be well on our way." The Varanii gathered around the shuttle, murmuring in amazement at both Hector's return and his achievements. Elder Morvith approached, leaning heavily on his staff but standing straighter than before. "It seems we misjudged you, Commander Renfield," the elder admitted. "Few would risk themselves so completely for people not their own. They became my people the moment I accepted responsibility for Kishra and Yona," Hector replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "The Ancestral Rite may have started it, but what happens now is my choice." Kishra studied him with an unreadable expression. "And what is your choice, Hector Renfield?" He met her gaze directly. "To see this through, to get your people to safety beyond Imperial reach." And then, he hesitated, decades of isolation making the words difficult. "And then to find out what this bond between us truly means beyond ancient custom or circumstance." Something softened in her features, a vulnerability she rarely allowed to show. "The Rite brought us together, but it does not dictate the shape of what we become to each other." Their moment of connection was interrupted by the arrival of Yona, who approached with measured steps, her bearing still carrying echoes of the ancient presence that had manifested through her. She looked at Hector with those ageless eyes, then at the shuttle behind him. "The ancestors approve," she said simply. "They say it is time for their children to find a new home, one where the old knowledge can flourish again." Hector knelt to her level. "And what about you? Are you all right after whatever happened back there?" A small smile touched her lips, the first truly childlike expression he'd seen from her. "I remember everything now. What we were. What we could be again." She reached out to touch the faint mark on his forehead that only she seemed able to see clearly. "And I remember you, though you do not yet remember yourself." The cryptic statement sent a shiver through Hector, but before he could question her further, Mira interrupted with an urgent alert. Imperial reinforcements detected entering the system. Estimated arrival time, 6 hours. The peaceful moment shattered as reality reasserted itself. Hector immediately shifted back to tactical mode. "We need to move now. The shuttle can transport 30 at a time. We'll need to make multiple trips to the rendezvous point." The most vulnerable first, Kishra decided immediately. Children, elders, those with specialized knowledge. "Elder." Morvith nodded in agreement. "And what of our pursuer?" He gestured toward the unconscious general in the shuttle's hold. "We bring him," Hector said grimly. "His codes will get us past Imperial checkpoints, and his presence will discourage immediate pursuit once they realize he's our hostage." Over the next 5 hours, they worked with relentless efficiency. The shuttle made 3 round trips to the abandoned mining outpost in the Scarlet Canyons, transporting the majority of the Varanii community and essential supplies. Ancient artifacts were carefully packed and moved, including components from the heart that Yona insisted must be preserved. Throughout the evacuation, the complex's defenses remained active, creating the illusion of continued occupation to any Imperial scans. The ancient drones patrolled the perimeter, their advanced technology easily fooling standard surveillance. As Hector prepared for the final evacuation run, which would include Kishra, Yona, the remaining elders, and himself, General Varric finally began to regain consciousness. Securely restrained in the shuttle's hold, the Imperial commander fixed Hector with a glare of pure hatred from his cybernetic eye. "You've exceeded even my lowest expectations of your treason, Renfield," Varric rasped, his voice rough from disuse. Hector checked the restraints one final time. "I prefer to think of it as finally living up to my highest principles." "Principles?" Varric sneered. "You've allied yourself with primitive aliens against your own species. There's no principle in that, only weakness." "My species?" Hector laughed bitterly. The Imperium stopped representing humanity the moment it decided that might makes right. These primitives have shown more humanity than the entire Imperial command structure. Varric's expression shifted to one of calculated assessment. "You've changed. There's something different about you, something beyond mere ideological conversion." His cybernetic eye words softly, focusing. "You're carrying trace energy signatures I've never encountered before." "What did they do to you?" "They showed me a better way," Hector replied simply. "Everything else is classified." Leaving the general to his restrained fury, Hector returned to the main chamber, where final preparations were underway. Most of the ancient systems had been powered down or removed, the settlement now a hollow shell of its former glory. Kishra approached, her few personal possessions packed and ready. "It is strange," she mused, looking around at the emptying cavern. "For generations, my people have hidden in places like this, preserving what remains of the ancient knowledge while slowly diminishing. Now we leave to start anew elsewhere." "Not diminishing anymore," Hector pointed out. "Yona has awakened something that was dormant for too long. Your people have a future now, one they choose, not one forced upon them by circumstance or the Imperium." "And what of your future?" she asked, her gaze direct and searching. Before he could answer, the complex's remaining sensors triggered an alert. Imperial forces had begun their final approach earlier than anticipated. "We need to move. Now," Hector ordered, all personal considerations set aside. "Final group to the shuttle immediately." As they hurried toward the exit, Yona suddenly stopped, turning back toward the heart chamber. "We cannot leave yet," she announced with unexpected authority. "There is one last thing the ancestors require." Kishara looked torn between maternal concern and respect for the ancient presence that sometimes spoke through her daughter. "Yona, we have no time. We must make time," the child insisted, "or all of this will have been for nothing." Something in her tone convinced Hector. "Make it quick," he told Yona, then turned to the others. "Everyone else to the shuttle. We'll follow." Despite obvious reluctance, Kishara nodded to the remaining Varanii, who proceeded toward the exit. She alone remained, standing firmly beside Hector. "I stay with my daughter," she stated simply. They followed Yona back to the heart chamber, now mostly empty of the machinery that had been carefully dismantled for transport. The crystalline central structure remained, pulsing with faint energy. Without hesitation, Yona approached it, placing both hands on its surface. Energy surged once more, though less intensely than before. The child spoke in an ancient dialect that Hector couldn't understand, but which seemed to resonate with the very stone around them. "What is she doing?" he whispered to Kishara. Setting the final protocols, Kishara replied softly, "Ensuring the ancestors' legacy cannot be misused." As Yona continued her communion with the ancient system, the crystalline structure began to change, its internal configuration rearranging, energy patterns shifting. After several tense minutes, she stepped back, her expression solemn but satisfied. "It is done," she announced. "The heart has been coded to my bloodline alone. If the Imperium attempts to force activation, the entire complex will initiate molecular collapse." "You've set a self-destruct," Hector realized, impressed despite the urgency of their situation. "Not destruction," Yona corrected. "Transformation. The knowledge will be preserved, but in a form only the worthy can access." She turned her ancient eyes to Hector. "The ancestors say you are among those worthy, though you do not yet remember why." Once again, the cryptic statement sent a shiver through him, but Imperial proximity alerts from Mira left no time for questions. "We need to go. Now," he insisted, and this time neither Kishara nor Yona objected. They raced through emptying corridors, the ancient complex already beginning its dormancy protocols around them. Lights dimmed, doors sealed, and protective barriers engaged. By the time they reached the exit point, the settlement had transformed into an impenetrable fortress once more, but one without inhabitants to protect. The shuttle was loaded and ready, Elder Morvith anxiously awaiting their arrival. "The Imperial ships have entered atmosphere," he reported as they boarded. "We have perhaps minutes before they reach scanning range." Hector took the pilot's seat, his hands moving swiftly across the control panel. "Everyone secure? This departure won't be gentle." As the shuttle lifted off, its sensors detected the first Imperial vessels cresting the horizon. Using terrain features for cover, Hector guided the craft in a nap-of-the-earth flight path that kept them below standard scanning altitude. "They're not pursuing," Kishara observed, monitoring the tactical display. "They've focused on the mountain," Hector confirmed, "as we hoped they would." From their vantage point, they caught a final glimpse of the broken teeth as Imperial forces converged on the abandoned complex. Even from a distance, they could see energy weapons discharging against ancient shields that still held firm. "What will happen?" Elder Morvith asked quietly. "They'll waste time and resources attempting to breach defenses that no longer protect anything of value," Hector explained with grim satisfaction. "And by the time they realize the settlement is empty, will be well beyond their reach." The journey to the mining outpost took less than an hour at maximum speed. As they approached, Hector was gratified to see that the Varanii had already established a functional temporary settlement, with guard posts and basic infrastructure organized according to his earlier instructions. When they landed, the entire community gathered to welcome this final group. Children, who had been noticeably subdued in the underground settlement, now played openly under the vast sky, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension of recent events. "They adapt quickly," Hector remarked, observing the transformation. "They are children of survivors," Kishara replied. It is in their nature to find life where others see only hardship. Over the next 3 days, the mining outpost evolved from a temporary haven into something more permanent. The mineral-rich canyons provided natural shielding from Imperial sensors, while the abandoned equipment offered raw materials for constructing more comfortable dwellings. General Varric remained their reluctant guest, heavily guarded but treated humanely. His presence ensured that any Imperial forces that eventually tracked them would approach with caution rather than immediate hostility. On the fourth morning, Hector climbed to a high vantage point above the settlement to assess their defensive perimeter. He found Kishra already there, gazing toward the distant horizon where the twin suns were beginning their daily ascent. "The rite is fulfilled," she said without preamble as he joined her. "You saved not only my daughter, but my entire people." Hector leaned against the rocky outcropping beside her. "Does that mean you're free of your obligation now?" She turned to study him, her midnight eyes unreadable. "The formal bond is complete, yes. My debt of honor is paid." A pause. "Is that what you wish? For me to release you from further connection?" The question caught him off guard. In the chaos of recent events, he hadn't fully examined his own feelings about their strange partnership. The ancestral Rite had initially seemed an unwelcome complication to his solitary existence. Now, the thought of its conclusion left him with an unexpected sense of loss. "I don't know what I wish," he admitted honestly. "For so long, my only goal was survival. Then it became ensuring your survival, and Yona's, and your people's." He gestured toward the bustling settlement below. "Now, that's accomplished, and I find myself without a clear purpose." Kishra's expression softened. Purpose need not always be bound to crisis. Perhaps there is value in building something, rather than merely preserving it from destruction. Building what exactly? She moved closer, close enough that he could see flecks of deep violet in her midnight eyes. A life, a community, a future where neither of us is bound by obligation or circumstance, but by choice. The implication of her words hung in the clear morning air between them. After a moment's hesitation, Hector reached for the oath stone still hanging around his neck, the symbol of their forced connection. "Then perhaps this should be returned to you," he said, beginning to remove the chain. Kishra stopped him, her hand covering his. "Keep it," she said softly, "not as a reminder of obligation, but as a symbol of where we began. What follows now will be written by our own choices, not by ancient customs." The touch of her hand sent a current of warmth through him that had nothing to do with obligation or honor or duty. For the first time in years, perhaps the first time ever, Hector felt the possibility of a connection that wasn't defined by military hierarchy or survival necessity. The moment was interrupted by Mira's approach, the drone hovering respectfully until acknowledged. "Commander, we have established communication with the trading outpost on Ashar's moon," the AI reported. "They are willing to provide transport for the community to the autonomous settlements in the outer reaches beyond Imperial jurisdiction." "How soon?" Hector asked. "Their transport vessel will reach our position in approximately 14 standard days. They require advance payment in technological artifacts." Hector glanced at Kishra. "Will the elders agree to trade some of the ancient technology?" "Only the non-essential components," she replied thoughtfully. "But yes, I believe they will see the wisdom in such an exchange." As Mira departed to relay this information, they remained at the vantage point, watching as the settlement below continued its morning activities. Yona had emerged from their dwelling, joining a group of children gathered around Elder Morvith, who appeared to be teaching them something about the native flora. "She seems more like a normal child today," Hector observed. Kishra nodded, a mother's concern evident in her expression. The connection with the ancestors' systems took a toll. The knowledge she accessed was not meant for one so young. Her voice softened. "But she is strong, and children are resilient. Each day, she returns more to herself. And the abilities she demonstrated, they remain, though less pronounced now that she's no longer in direct contact with the heart." Kishra watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "She will always be different," marked by her heritage and experiences. But perhaps here, among our people and away from those who would exploit her, she can find balance. They descended to the settlement together, where preparations were already underway for the community's eventual departure. General Varick, under guard but permitted limited movement within a defined area, observed their approach with cold calculation. "Your little rebellion has a short shelf life, Renfield," the general commented as they passed. "The Imperium's reach is longer than you imagine." Hector paused, studying his former mentor. "The Imperium's reach is precisely why we're leaving its jurisdiction entirely. The autonomous settlements of the outer reaches aren't interested in your politics or your wars. There's nowhere beyond the Imperium's interest if there's valuable technology involved," Varick replied, his cybernetic eye focusing on Yona in the distance. "Especially technology linked to specific genetic markers." Kishra stepped forward, her posture suddenly martial. "You will never touch my daughter or my people again. That future is closed to you." Something in her tone or stance must have penetrated even Varick's calculated arrogance. He retreated a step before regaining his composure. "We shall see." As they continued toward the center of the settlement, Hector considered the general's warning. He's right about one thing. The Imperium won't simply forget about the ancient technology or Yona's abilities. "Then we must ensure we are prepared," Kishra replied. "Not just to run, but to stand firm if necessary." The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. The settlement evolved from a temporary refuge into a more organized community. Dwellings became more substantial, water reclamation systems were established, and defensive positions were hardened. Hector found himself fully engaged in this transformation, applying his tactical and engineering knowledge to civilian purposes for perhaps the first time in his life. More surprising was how naturally he integrated into the Varanii community. Despite his obvious differences, they accepted his leadership and contributions without reservation. His relationship with Kishra evolved as well. Freed from the formal constraints of the ancestral rite, they discovered a natural affinity that transcended their initial connection. They began spending evenings together, sharing stories of their vastly different lives, finding unexpected common ground in their experiences of loss and resilience. Yona, too, formed a bond with him that went beyond her mother's initial obligation. She sought him out for lessons in basic self-defense and tactics, absorbing his teachings with the same uncanny aptitude she'd shown with the ancient systems. On the 12th day, as the trading vessel's arrival grew imminent, Elder Morvith called a community gathering in the central plaza of their makeshift settlement. All the Varanii attended, with Hector standing somewhat awkwardly at the periphery until Kishra beckoned him to join her and Yona in the front row. "We stand at a crossroads," the elder began, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "For generations, our people have hidden, preserving what remains of the ancestors' legacy, while our numbers dwindled and our purpose faded. We became caretakers of a past we barely understood, fearful of a future we could not control." He gestured toward the surrounding settlement. "Now, through circumstances none could have foreseen, we have been forced from hiding, not into extinction, as we long feared, but into the possibility of renewal." His gaze found Hector. A stranger from beyond our world fed a starving child, unknowingly invoking the ancestral rite. That simple act of compassion has transformed not just one family, but our entire people. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. Elder Morvith continued, his voice strengthening. "As we prepare to leave this world for the outer reaches, we must decide what we carry forward. Not just artifacts and technology, but values and purpose." He extended his hand toward Yona. "The child who carries the blood of the ancestors has shown us that our heritage is not merely to be preserved, but revitalized, used, shared with those worthy of its gifts." Yona stepped forward at his gesture, her small form somehow commanding in the fading light. "The ancestors speak through me one final time," she announced, her voice carrying that otherworldly resonance. "They say, the time of hiding ends. The time of renewal begins. Seek not to reclaim what was, but to build what might be. And remember, power without wisdom destroys itself. Wisdom without compassion remains barren. She turned, extending her hand toward Hector in an unmistakable invitation. After a moment's hesitation, he joined her at the center of the gathering. The stranger who fed a child now stands as guardian to a people, she continued, not bound by blood or oath or ancient rite, but by choice and action and shared purpose. The ancestors recognized this bond as equal to their own. Elder Morvith stepped forward, holding a ceremonial blade that glowed with the same luminescence as the markings on Kishara's skin. With solemn precision, he made a small incision on Yona's palm, then looked expectantly at Hector. Understanding the ritual's significance, Hector extended his own hand, allowing the elder to make a similar cut. When their bleeding palms pressed together, a flash of energy, similar to what Hector had experienced in the mountain complex, passed between them. The sensation was unlike anything he had experienced before, not painful, but profoundly transformative. Knowledge and memory, not his own, flowed into his consciousness. Fragments of an ancient legacy too vast to fully comprehend, yet somehow familiar, as if awakening something long dormant within him. When they separated, Hector stared at his palm in astonishment. The cut had already sealed, replaced by a faint luminescent marking similar to those on Kishara and Yona. What was that? He managed to ask. Recognition, Yona explained, echoing her earlier statement. The ancestors have accepted you as one of their own, not by birth, but by spirit. Kishara approached, her expression a mixture of awe and something deeper, more personal. This has not happened in living memory, she said softly. For the ancestors to accept an outsider into the bloodline. It confirms what I have come to believe about you, Hector Renfield. Before he could ask what she meant, a signal from Mira interrupted the ceremony. Commander, detecting approach of a large vessel. Configuration matches the expected trading ship, but energy signature shows weapons powered. The peaceful moment shattered as Hector immediately shifted back to tactical mode. Everyone to defensive positions, he ordered. This may not be our traders. As the Varanii dispersed with practiced efficiency, Hector, Kishara, and Yona moved to the command post they had established at the settlement's highest point. From there, they could observe the approaching vessel as it descended through the atmosphere. Configuration is similar to a standard trading vessel, Mira reported, analyzing real-time data, but with military-grade modifications. Scanning capabilities, weapons systems, and engine output all exceed commercial specifications. Hector's expression hardened. Imperial intelligence. They've infiltrated or captured our trading contacts. Kishara studied the tactical display. How did they find us? The mineral content of these canyons should have blocked standard scanning. Not if they had a tracking device, Hector replied grimly, his gaze shifting to where General Varric was being brought under heavier guard to the command post. Something perhaps embedded in a cybernetic enhancement. The general's face revealed nothing, but the faintest smirk played at the corner of his mouth. You've been signaling them all along, Hector realized. Your eye implant. It's not just for visual enhancement. The Imperium never loses track of its valuable assets, Varric replied calmly. Whether those assets are generals or deserters or alien technology. The vessel was now visible to the naked eye, descending toward the landing area they had prepared for the trading ship. Its silhouette was indeed similar to a commercial craft, but the energy readings Mira displayed confirmed Hector's suspicions. This was a military operation disguised as a civilian approach. Options? Kishara asked tersely. Hector assessed their situation with cold clarity. We're outgunned, if that's a full tactical team. Our best advantage is that they'll want to capture, not destroy, especially with Varric on sight. He turned to Yona, who stood calmly watching the approaching threat. The artifacts we salvaged from the mountain complex, are any of them defensive systems we could activate? The child considered briefly before nodding. The shield generators would function, but require more power than we currently generate. and the recognition protocols are keyed to bloodline authorization, which you have, Hector noted, and apparently, now I share. Yona's eyes widened slightly as understanding dawned. Yes, together, we might be able to establish sufficient connection to activate the primary systems. Do it, Kishra directed immediately. I'll coordinate our people into defensive positions as backup. As Kishra departed, Hector and Yona hurried to the storage area where the most critical salvaged artifacts were kept. Under the child's guidance, they connected several crystalline components into a configuration that resembled a miniature version of the heart from the mountain complex. We must both connect simultaneously, Yona instructed, placing her marked palm against one facet of the assembled structure. Focus your intent on protection. The system responds to purpose as much as genetics. Hector placed his newly marked palm against the opposite facet, concentrating as directed. The sensation was immediate and powerful, energy flowing from the artifact into him and back again, creating a circuit of power that rapidly built in intensity. Outside, the disguised Imperial vessel had nearly completed its landing approach when a shimmering barrier suddenly materialized around the entire settlement. The ship's systems immediately registered the unexpected energy field, attempting evasive maneuvers too late. It struck the barrier with a spectacular discharge of energy that disrupted its propulsion systems, sending it careening into an unpopulated area of the canyon. Through his connection with the ancient technology, Hector could somehow sense the shield's integrity, its power consumption, its very nature. Knowledge flowed into him, not consciously, but at a deeper level that his mind struggled to process. The barrier will hold, Yona assured him, her voice distant through his trance-like connection. But we must prepare for their ground assault. They will send troops from the crashed vessel. With effort, Hector maintained the connection while expanding his awareness to include their tactical situation. Mira, he called, status report. The drone hovered nearby, monitoring the settlement's defensive preparations. Imperial vessel down, but largely intact. Life signs indicate approximately 40 personnel now deploying from the crash site. Estimated arrival at our perimeter in 15 minutes. Kishra returned to the command post, her expression grim but determined. Our people are in position. The combat capable are armed with salvaged Imperial weapons from the scouts we defeated. The others are sheltered in the central cavern. Hector nodded, careful not to break his physical connection to the artifact. They'll test the shield first, then look for weak points or attempt to overload it with concentrated fire. Can it withstand such an assault? Kishra asked, looking at her daughter. Yona's expression was distant, her consciousness partly merged with the ancient system. The shield draws power from geothermal sources beneath us. It will hold against conventional weapons, but not indefinitely. Then we need to take the offensive, Hector decided. Use the shield as protection while we launch a counterattack. General Varric, still under guard nearby, laughed coldly. A tactical error, Renfield. My forces are better trained and better equipped. Your ragtag band of aliens and one deserter can't hope to overcome Imperial Special Forces. Perhaps not under normal circumstances, Hector conceded. But these aren't normal circumstances. He turned to Yona. Can we modulate the shield to allow our people out while keeping hostiles contained? The child nodded slowly. The ancestors designed their systems with such precision. We can create a permeable membrane of sorts. Those recognized by the system may pass. Others will be repelled. Like we did with the drones during the mountain assault, Hector realized. Perfect. Working together, they reconfigured the shield parameters. Hector could feel the changes through his connection. The energy field becoming more complex, developing recognition protocols that would allow the Varanii defenders to pass through while containing the Imperial forces. Kishra organized their counterattack with practiced efficiency. The most combat-capable Varanii were armed and positioned, with Mira providing real-time intelligence on the approaching Imperial troops. Even some of the elders took up defensive positions, ancient ceremonial weapons in hand that now hummed with reactivated energy. As the Imperial forces reached the perimeter and began testing the shield with weapons fire, Hector gave the order. Now! The Varanii defenders moved through the shield as if it were merely air, emerging behind and beside the surprised Imperial troops. The battle that followed was brief but intense. What the Varanii lacked in numbers and conventional training, they made up for with the element of surprise and their intimate knowledge of the terrain. Hector maintained his connection to the shield system while monitoring the conflict through Mira's feed. The tactics he had developed and the positions he had established proved effective, allowing the Varanii to engage and then retreat through the shield before the Imperials could mount an organized response. Within 30 minutes, the Imperial forces were in disarray, cut off from their crashed vessel, unable to penetrate the settlement's shield, and suffering mounting casualties from an enemy that could strike and then literally disappear through what appeared to be a solid energy barrier. "They're falling back," Kishra reported, returning briefly to the command post. Blood from a minor wound streaked her cheek, but her eyes shone with fierce triumph. Retreating to higher ground to regroup. As expected, Hector nodded. "They'll call for reinforcements now." "Which won't come," she reminded him. "Not with their communications disrupted by the canyon's mineral content. They'll try to get their ship's long-range transmitter working," Hector predicted. "We need to prevent that." Kishra understood immediately. "I'll lead a team to secure the crash site." As she departed again, Hector felt a strange sensation through his connection with the ancient technology, a kind of resonance that seemed to be building towards something significant. Yona, still linked to the system beside him, noticed his reaction. "You feel it," she observed. "The acceleration." "Acceleration of what?" "Your awakening." Her ancient eyes studied him with knowing beyond her years. "The dormant genetic markers in your blood, activated by our sharing of blood, now further stimulated by prolonged connection to the ancestors' technology." Hector stared at her in confusion. "What are you talking about? I'm human, not Varanii." "Yes and no," she replied cryptically. "The ancestors seeded many worlds, many peoples. Some lines remained pure. Others blended with indigenous populations. Your lineage carries traces of their genetic signature, distant but present. It is why you adapted so quickly to our ways, why the ancient drones responded to your commands, why the blood ritual took hold in you when it should not have been possible with a true outsider." The revelation stunned him. "You're saying I have alien DNA? That I'm part Varanii?" "Not Varanii specifically," she corrected. "The ancestors came before both our peoples. They're the source from which many streams flow." She gestured to their joined connection with the shield generator. "This accelerates the awakening of those dormant genetic memories. You will soon remember things you never learned." As if triggered by her words, fragments of knowledge began surfacing in Hector's consciousness. Understanding of the ancient technology that went beyond anything he could have learned or deduced. Principles of energy manipulation, quantum-level programming concepts, and biological integration systems suddenly made intuitive sense to him. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No more impossible than a child commanding the power of the ancestors," Yona replied with a small smile. "We are all more than we appear," Hector Renfield. Their conversation was interrupted by Mira's alert. Imperial forces regrouping for a concentrated assault on the shield's northeastern quadrant. They appear to have adapted their weapons to a frequency that may disrupt our defenses. Hector immediately refocused on the tactical situation, using his newfound understanding to strengthen the shield where the attack would come. Through their connection, he guided Yona in reconfiguring the energy distribution, creating a layered defense that would absorb and redirect the Imperial weapons output. When the attack came, it was indeed more effective than previous attempts, the specialized frequency causing visible ripples in the shield's coherence. But the adaptations Hector had implemented held firm, the barrier absorbing the energy and actually growing stronger from the input. "They don't understand what they're dealing with," Hector realized aloud. "They're trying to overcome the shield with brute force, but they're actually feeding it." Yona nodded. "The ancestors designed their systems to harness hostile energy, not merely resist it." Each attack strengthens our position. From the crashed Imperial vessel, a more coordinated effort was emerging. Kishara and her team had engaged the crew, trying to repair the ship's communications array, preventing them from calling reinforcements but becoming pinned down in the process. They need support, Hector decided, monitoring the situation through Mira's feed. But I can't break connection with the shield system. I can maintain it alone briefly, Yona offered. Now that it's fully activated, a single bloodline connection is sufficient for basic functions. Hector hesitated, concerned about leaving the child alone with such responsibility. But Kishara's team was in genuine danger, and every moment counted. "Are you certain?" he asked Yona. She nodded confidently. "Go. Help my mother." With a final squeeze of her small hand, Hector broke his connection to the shield generator. The sudden severance left him momentarily disoriented as his consciousness fully returned to his body. But the new knowledge remained, integrated now into his understanding of the world. Grabbing his weapon, he rushed toward the crash site, moving through the shield boundary as easily as walking through air. Mira accompanied him, providing tactical updates and monitoring Yona's status remotely. The crashed Imperial vessel lay half embedded in the canyon wall, its hull breached in multiple locations, but its central systems still operational. Kishara and 5 Varanii fighters had engaged an equal number of Imperial troops defending the ship's communication array. The exchange of energy weapon fire illuminated the gathering dusk with flashes of blue and crimson. Hector assessed the situation instantly, noting the Imperial troops' defensive positions and Kishara's team's increasingly precarious situation. Using hand signals he had taught them during training, he directed 2 Varanii to provide covering fire while he circled to flank the Imperial position. Moving with the stealth skills honed from years of survival, Hector approached the Imperial defensive line from behind. The soldiers, focused on a frontal threat from Kishara's team, never detected his presence until it was too late. With 3 precisely placed shots, he eliminated the enemy's tactical advantage, creating an opening for Kishara to advance. She seized the opportunity, leading her team in a coordinated rush that overwhelmed the remaining defenders. Within moments, they had secured the communications array, ensuring the Imperial forces remained isolated. "Perfect timing," Kishara acknowledged as Hector joined them at the vessel's breached entry port. They were about to bring the long-range transmitter online. The rest of their ground forces, still regrouping after their failed shield assault. She studied him intently. "You look different. Something has changed." Hector wasn't sure how to explain what was happening to him, the awakening of knowledge and abilities he hadn't known he possessed. Later, he promised, "First, we need to secure this vessel completely. It might be our ticket off this planet." They proceeded to clear the remaining compartments, encountering only token resistance from injured crew members. The ship's captain, severely wounded in the crash, surrendered formally when confronted, offering access codes to the vessel's systems in exchange for medical treatment. As Kishara organized the treatment and containment of Imperial prisoners, Hector examined the ship's control systems with Mira's assistance. Despite the crash damage, the main propulsion and navigation units remained functional. "Vite,